Number 3. The cats. Family relationships can be complicated. A lot of siblings barely get along, while others are best friends and remain super close up into adulthood. Some are even so closely bonded that they're willing to go to the extremes with each other. In August 2012, brother and sister duo Hayden and Abby Cat decided it'd be a good idea to try and rob a bank together. The siblings claimed that their dad, 51-year-old Scott Cat, convinced them into teaming up with him for the heist. Everyone knows that if you're going to try and pull off a massive robbery, you should make some kind of attempt to hide your identity. Hayden and Scott's disguises of choice were painter uniforms. The two men walked into the Comerica Bank with their weapons already drawn. The location was about a mile or so from the apartment building they lived in. While her brother and father went inside the bank, Abby stayed in the parked car outside and prepared to be the getaway driver. In an interview with ABC's 2020, Hayden said that the second he stepped foot into the building, his adrenaline was pumping. He felt so amped up that he could barely feel anything at all. His dad walked towards the employee at the counter and demanded to be taken back to the vault. The 20-year-old remembers that his body was shaking so badly that the terrified worker had to grab the bag he was holding out of his hands in order to put the money in. After stealing about $50,000, they ran outside to Abby, who was still waiting for them in the car. While everything was happening inside, Abby said that she just wanted everything to be over already. During the drive away, her father yelled at her a few times, saying that she shouldn't drive too fast because it would look suspicious. A few months after the first successful robbery in October 2012, the Cats decided to rob another site, this time a credit union in Katy, Texas. Instead of the painter disguises, Hayden and Scott thought they should switch things up and wear construction vests instead, which they purchased from a Home Depot. After stealing another $50,000 from the credit union, police officers caught on to the Cats' trail. By using surveillance footage from the store they purchased the vests at, investigators pulled Scott's name off the card that was used. On November 9th of that year, all three of them were arrested. You may be wondering what led this family to a life of crime. While growing up, Hayden and Abby lost their mom to breast cancer. She died at only 32 years old, and her passing hit Scott pretty hard. For the most part, the siblings did well in school, and their dad was the president of their swim club. But not long after their mom died, Scott started drinking. Before they knew it, he was getting arrested left and right for DUIs, disorderly conduct, and more. He made a living as an engineer, but his kids had no idea that he was also robbing banks. There were a few times when Hayden found wads of $100 bills lying around in his dad's bedroom, but as a teen, he didn't really think twice about it. A few years passed, and the family decided to move from their home state of Oregon to Texas in order to get a clean slate. However, Scott's past soon caught up to him. Before long, he found himself asking his son to help him out. Then soon after, his 18-year-old daughter Abby. In an interview after everything happened, Abby said that she agreed to help with the robberies because she thought it was the only way she could protect her father and brother. After all, they were the only family she had left. Sheriff Nels, from the department who apprehended the Cats family, said that he believed the young girl was more of a victim in this. He's decided that he wanted to try and help Abby turn her life around by making sure she can live a decent life after serving time. Scott, the mastermind behind the robberies, was sentenced to serve 24 years in prison for his crimes. He claims his actions were a result of prolonged alcohol abuse and that he truly feels sorry for what he's done. Hayden was handed 10 years while Abby was given 5 for her role in the robberies. While what they did was in no way right, we can't help but sympathize at least a little bit for the Cat siblings. And now for number 2. But first, it's shout-out time! We wanted to give a huge thank you to S6N, 6F, G6D, and Play and Tricks for supporting this channel. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe and join the Badger fam. Number 2. The Allens. Most everyone has had times in their lives when they wished someone else didn't exist, but most people wouldn't take things any farther than a simple thought. What would it take for you to actually consider killing someone though? Well, for a brother and sister from Indiana back in 2005, it was money. They weren't just going after any old rich person either. They wanted to kill 2 very specific wealthy elders, their grandparents. 29-year-old Kenneth Allen and his sister, 18-year-old Carrie Allen, teamed up to murder their relatives. At first, they went to their 53-year-old mother Sharon and asked if she wanted to work with them. To their surprise and disappointment, she refused. The siblings couldn't just let their mom walk around free after asking her to help them commit unspeakable crimes, so they killed her too. Kenneth allegedly stabbed her several times with a knife at their home in Noblesville, Indiana. Not long after, the Allen siblings asked their grandma, 75-year-old Betty Bradley, if she'd meet them at the same property. When she arrived, they took a flimsy plastic bag, placed it over the elderly woman's head, and suffocated her to death. Then the pair drove to their grandparents' house to go after their grandpa, 91-year-old Leander Lee Bailey. It's believed that Kenneth carried out the actual murders while Carrie helped stand watch. He supposedly killed his grandfather with a few swings of a hammer. It didn't take long for the truth behind the deaths to come out. The brother and sister duo planned to escape to Las Vegas by driving cross-country, but they ended up getting pulled over by police for speeding somewhere near St. Louis. And according to the officers, the siblings were acting strange. They seemed overly nervous, and when the cops asked them questions about what they were doing and where they were heading, they gave different answers. A quick search of their rental car's trunk revealed credit cards, cash, jewelry, bloody bedding, and the IDs of both Betty and Leander. At that point, there was really no way to talk themselves out of the situation, so they confessed to the murders. The officers who spoke with them said that Carrie admitted things without even being asked. She said, "I'm sorry. We killed my mom and my grandparents and buried them in the basement." A little while later, Kenneth also spoke up and told authorities what they did. Investigators searched the basement of Leander and Betty's home and found positive traces of human remains. They were contained inside a newly poured concrete floor. One of the grandparents' neighbors, Doug David, said that he saw the Allen siblings at the house sometime around Christmas. He hadn't seen his elderly neighbors for a few weeks by that point, so he thought that the visit seemed strange. His curiosity was piqued after noticing Kenneth carrying a jackhammer into the house, followed by Carrie running to the car just to grab a few large buckets with shovels. Doug found the siblings' behavior strange, and when he spoke to others in the neighborhood, they did too. According to him, many people thought they should call and check up on the older couple, but sadly, no one ever did. It's something they'll likely regret for a long time. With the tools Kenneth and Carrie brought in, they dismembered the victims' bodies before burying them and covering them with concrete. We mentioned that their motivation was money, but just how much money was it? What amount made them want to brutally kill some of their closest family members? The answer is $200,000. Their grandparents had this enormous sum sitting in their savings account, and the Allen siblings couldn't wait to get their hands on it. Charges brought against Kenneth and Carrie included 3 counts of murder, robbery, and conspiracy. While Kenneth was sentenced to life in prison with an additional 130 years and no parole, his sister received a bit of leniency. The judge took pity on her since Carrie suffered from multiple cognitive issues, had a low IQ, and was just 18 at the time of the murders. On top of all this, she was known to be terrified of her older brother, so it's possible that he coaxed her into helping him. These factors led the judge to give Carrie only 38 years in prison, and she'll be eligible for parole as early as 2024. However, prosecutors in the case initially wanted the younger sister to face up to 100 years. They argued that she had multiple opportunities to alert the police of their crimes, but didn't take any of them. If she was really coerced into participating, in a way, she's a victim herself. It's hard to wrap your mind around how anyone could be capable of killing their own family using such brutal methods. But everyone knows, money can make people do crazy things. Even though this tragedy happened almost 20 years ago, it still lingers in the minds of many. After all, how could you forget a story like this? Number 1. The Cummins. There's certain lines that should never be crossed. One is killing a person, and another is killing a disabled person. Unfortunately, 36-year-old Sabrina Cummins and her 26-year-old younger brother Kenneth didn't care about crossing boundaries. Apparently, Kenneth is a common name for a killer. Anyways, the Cummins siblings were charged with killing 63-year-old Thomas Horan in January 2014. Thomas was murdered inside his apartment at a senior citizens building. The victim lived there alone with about 40 other individuals in the complex as a whole. Despite living by himself, Thomas had a romantic partner named Margaret who lived not too far away in the south inner city of Dublin. The two had a daughter together, and she's now an adult working as a nurse in England. The victim had never had a sip of alcohol or smoked a cigarette a single time in his whole life. He lived with learning problems, and even though he was 63 years old, he was illiterate and never actually mastered reading and writing. It's believed that the siblings broke into Thomas's apartment to try and rob him. Sadly, the heist went sideways and ended in a gruesome murder. The victim's body was discovered inside his bedroom at around 4 a.m. When police first came to the scene, they thought that the elderly man had passed away from natural causes. This assumption was made because there was no evidence found indicating that a break-in had occurred. However, an autopsy and post-mortem examination conducted by the state pathologist Dr. Marie Cassidy revealed otherwise. The man suffered from a violent beating that resulted in his death. It's been reported that Sabrina kicked and punched Thomas, joining Kenneth, who was already beating the man. The two managed to break a few of the victim's ribs and also strangled him with a nearby belt. A detective on the case named Garda Brian Hunt eventually connected the Cummins siblings to the murder. DNA evidence, text messages, security camera footage, and more tied them to the scene of the crime at the time of Thomas's death. During his trial, Kenneth made an attempt to justify his actions. He claimed that Sabrina had previously told him before they got to the older man's apartment that Thomas had sexually abused not only her, but another one of their female relatives as well. Of course, no support for this outrageous claim was ever brought forward. If anything, it was likely just a desperate attempt to gather sympathy during the trial. One woman who will never feel sorry for the siblings is June Cummins, the killer's sister. This woman has suffered and gone through more loss than any person should ever experience in a single lifetime. She'd already lost her sister Breda not too long before the murders. And then, with the added stress of finding out Kenneth and Sabrina killed somebody, her mother died as well in 2015. June blames her twisted siblings for the death of their mom. She says that the horrible news right after losing Breda sent her into a health crisis, causing her to have a fatal heart attack at just 62 years old. Whatever amount of money the siblings thought they were going to get from robbing a defenseless elderly man was surely not worth the results of what happened. Despite being close enough to kill with each other, their bond couldn't have been that strong considering how Kenneth quickly tried to pin things on his older sister. Arguments could be made that the two were still reeling from the death of their sibling Breda, but that still wouldn't justify taking an innocent life. After being found guilty of the murder of Thomas Horan, Kenneth and Sabrina Cummins were both sentenced to life in prison. What's the craziest thing you've ever done with your siblings? Let us know down in the comments section. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification button if you'd like updates every time we post. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Bad Badger.